the amazing thing about Twitter and things like Spaces are that, although I happen to be hosting I had to switch over to David hosting it because my account was actually
there's too much interest.
But my account was breaking the system. But there's really never been a mechanism before where someone could address the nation, or anyone who wanted to listen to them could, from anywhere in the world, United States or anywhere. So I think this is a really profound change, and it's also like it's not just whether the media reports something and an article is true or not. Even more powerful is deciding what the narrative is, and totally. So so just like if there's only so much you can actually fit in a newspaper or a magazine, and there's only one thing you can really put on the cover of a magazine. So that whoever's deciding that is deciding to not talk about other things. Whereas with a public digital town square like we have here, it's possible for the public to choose the narrative. It empowers the people instead of a very tiny elite cabal, which I don't recognize the irony of me using that phrase. But nonetheless, it's true, and you judge by the results that this is a means for the people to decide the narrative, and for the people to decide which way a debate will go. Not sort of 5 editors-in-chiefs of a few newspapers, basically.
Yeah, and I think one of the really crazy things that happened during COVID is that social networks really started censoring dissenting viewpoints on COVID, medical viewpoints that ended up being totally correct in lockstep with what the mainstream media was doing. So basically, big tech platforms were undermining their main reason for existing, which is giving people a choice. And actually, there's somebody who I think knows more about that than any of us, which is Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who's a professor of medicine at Stanford. I want to pull him in here. Jay, you go ahead and unmute yourself if you can. It'd be great to hear from you. I know that during COVID, you worked with Governor DeSantis. It'd be great just to hear a little bit about your interactions and if you have a question for the governor.
Yeah, thank you, David. Yeah, I mean, it was an absolute honor to work with Governor DeSantis, and I was really impressed by his decision making in the face of an absolute firestorm of criticism. But Governor, you did the right thing when you opened the schools. And my kids in California for a year and a half didn't see the inside of a classroom, whereas Florida kids were in school. And you can see it in the results, and the learning loss numbers are so much better in Florida. I'm really curious, Governor, as you're running for president, what are your thoughts about reforming the public health authority in the United States and the federal government, the CDC, the FDA, the NIH? How do you see the reforms we need so that the mistakes of the lockdowns that happened during the pandemic don't happen again when there's another pandemic?
Well, first, we need an honest reckoning about what happened during COVID. And the only honest reckoning is that all of those agencies, all of the elites, the public health establishment, they failed. They instituted bad policies. Obviously, it's a novel virus, but I think what happened was when the data was becoming more and more apparent that the path they were on was wrong, they doubled down and wanted to do it even more. And I really believe had Florida not just kind of stood in the way, I think this country would have had rolling lockdowns for probably a 2-year period. And so their impulses were authoritarian. They were not following the data. And I think the U.S. government needs to acknowledge the failures. And I think all of those agencies need to be cleaned out. What I saw just dealing with them was I saw a interest in the narrative and in politics over evidence-based reasoning and evidence-based medicine. And so I don't have confidence that those agencies are up to the task. And I think you need major overhaul of the whole enchilada with respect to public health in this country.
Can I follow up with that? I mean, I think the other thing that I saw during the pandemic, Governor, and you was subject to it just as much as I was when we were talking about COVID. YouTube censored a video of us speaking about in a roundtable that you hosted on COVID policy. there's so much of the federal government infrastructure went into suppressing honest scientific discussion during the pandemic. So it's not just public health agencies, but other agencies inside the federal government that worked to suppress the speech of Americans. And I'd love to hear
No
your thoughts
question.
about it.
No question. So I'm actually in Florida. We recognize the danger there. So I'm actually going to be signing a digital bill of rights for Florida pretty soon, which will bar all state and local government officials from colluding or working with a technology company for the purpose of censorship of speech. Because you're exactly right. You had people in the White House, you had people in all these other agencies working with these platforms to try to take it down. And oh, by the way, what did they censor Dr. Bhattacharya for? It was a roundtable discussion that I led and convened. We had Dr. Bhattacharya, MD, PhD from Stanford. We had Martin Kulldorff from Harvard Medical School, and we had Sunetra Gupta from Oxford, who was generally viewed as one of the best epidemiologists across the pond until she became anti-lockdown. So these are all eminent people. And what are we discussing? We're discussing whether there's any scientific basis to force a school child to wear a mask for 8 hours a day. They all agreed there was no basis to do it and that you should not have school mask mandates. YouTube thought that that was, quote, anti-science and that that should be taken down. But even at that point, we had already had enough experience in Florida where you had some schools that had done it before the state banned the mandates. You had some schools that had done it, some schools didn't, and the results were no different. And yet his video was taken down by Google YouTube. So it was a huge, huge problem. And yes, I think the federal government, FBI, DHS, any of the health agencies, it's unconstitutional for them to be delegating speech restriction to a private company. You can't do indirectly what the Constitution would clearly forbid you to do directly.
Let me pull in. We have Congressman Thomas Massey. If you're there, go ahead and unmute yourself. I mean, what we're talking about here is, I think, really unconstitutional actions by federal agencies. Congressman Massey, I know that you've been involved in this problem of government agencies being weaponized and used against the American people in an inappropriate way. Do you have a comment on this? And do you have a question for Governor DeSantis?
Well, first of all, let me say a big thank you to Elon Musk for buying Twitter and exposing all of this. On our weaponization committee, we wouldn't know so much of it if he hadn't done this, almost as a public service to the First Amendment. It's a disturbing trend. Government, as the governor said, the government is colluding with big corporations. We found out this week from an FBI whistleblower that Bank of America voluntarily gave names of and information on anybody who bought a hot dog in Washington, D.C. from January 5th to January 7th, and then overlaid that with gun purchases that they had on record anywhere in the country for any period of time. And just, they say they voluntarily gave that to the FBI. So that's disturbing to me. By the way, I've never met Elon Musk, but I'm one of your biggest fans. I'm the first congressman to have a Tesla. I'm on
Thank you.
I'm on Starlink, and I would have bought a Powerwall, but I'm off the grid, and you wouldn't sell me one, so I had to make one with a wrecked Model S, and it's been running our house for 5 years. But my
And just for the record, I was with Thomas our first year in Congress. He's got the Tesla, but his license plate is Kentucky Coal. So it's he's probably one of the only people that have that in the country.
Thanks for outing me, Governor DeSantis. But no, so Governor DeSantis, my question to you is, you served here in Congress for 6 years with me. And why is it that Congress is so feckless at reining in these government agencies? And what do you think we need to do? And if you were president, what would you urge Congress, or what bills would you like to see and sign to rein in this, sort of overreach of government bureaucracy?
Well, first, I think there's a lot that the executive branch can do, and all I will say when it comes to these agencies, we'll go into this a little bit more as the campaign goes on. But buckle up when I get in there, because the status quo is not acceptable, and we are going to make sure that we reconstitutionalize this government. And these agencies are totally out of control. There's the reason it's gotten so bad, fourth branch of government, because Congress hasn't used its two main powers that it has under the Constitution. First, the power of the purse. If an agency is gauging in conduct that is outside the realm of what is legal, or you think it's not good for the public interest, then you can remove the funding for those operations. There's nothing that they're not entitled to get the same level of funding every year, and yet Congress runs the government on autopilot, either continuing resolutions or massive omnibus spending bills. So these agencies are all bulletproof. They know that they're going to end up getting something similar or more every single year, and it creates an incentive for them to abuse their power. The other thing you can do is actually legislate, so you're not delegating to the bureaucracy key issues regarding how to enforce federal law. You should define what you want. All they should be doing is implementing. Instead, Congress will basically give an invitation for the bureaucracy to make really important substantive decisions. And so Congress may never vote on something, and the bureaucracy will cite a law from 20 years ago and do things that are going to transform our society or our country. That is not the way the founding fathers drew up the Constitution.
So would you sign the Reins Act? We passed it out of judiciary today.
Oh, yeah, no, of
You want
course. Yeah, that's a no-brainer. That would, I think, be a great check for that. I also think that we're going to have a good chance to see some of this Chevron deference really curtailed or maybe even eliminated based on the U.S. Supreme Court's upcoming jurisprudence. And I think that's another reason why the bureaucracy has become so powerful, because courts have basically been told they can pretty much do what they want, and courts are supposed to just defer. I don't think that that's actually correct. I think the courts, they have to make a judgment about what does the law actually say, and you can't just defer to quote unquote experts in the bureaucracy.
Thank you.
All right, shifting gears, Governor, I want to ask you another topic that's been in the news a lot is Disney. They blamed you for canceling plans for $1 billion investment in Florida, said they were canceling 2,000 jobs. I saw other reports that suggested Disney was going to make the cuts anyway, and due to a larger, budget cutting initiative. Regardless of why they did it, why do you feel your fight with Disney remains important? Considering you already beat them on the parental rights bill that they opposed? And what would you say to some of your opponents in this race who argue that the fight has dragged on too long?
So, first of all, Florida stands for the protection of children. We believe jamming gender ideology in elementary school is wrong. Disney obviously supported injecting gender ideology in elementary school. They did oppose our parents' rights legislation. And the fact is, when they opposed it, that was a big deal, because for 50 years, anytime Disney wanted something in Florida politics, they pretty much got it. But not this time. I signed the bill. We did, as you say, win on the issue. But what happened was Disney's posturing, some of the other statements that their executives were making, kind of the corporate culture, had really been outed as trying to inject matters of sex into the programming for the youth. And I think a lot of parents, including me, look at that and say, that's not appropriate. I mean, we want our kids to be able to just be kids, and that's kind of our mantra. So you had this setup that Disney engineered many decades ago, where they actually had their own government that they controlled with no accountability. They were exempt from the laws that all their competitors had to follow, massive tax breaks, and they even racked up municipal debt. And Florida basically put them on a pedestal many decades ago and joined the state with this one company, outlived its usefulness, but it persisted because Disney was so politically powerful. I think the company's ethos have changed in a way that's alienated a lot of people in our legislature and in Florida. And so there was really no justification to keep it. We have the right to do what we did.
It's funny. The media used to criticize Republicans for being in the pocket of big corporations, and now they're attacking you because you're
he was not accountable to anyone. I mean, when the state was in Central Florida, who were really thankful that there was some entity. Of course, they're going to behave differently than laws. Well, then all of a sudden they're running to Disney's defense. I mean, are you kidding me? And oh, by the way, on this project, and they were closed in California. And that went on for many, many months, where literally I had all the theme parks in Florida opened in 2020. People are going, it's safe, they're having fun. And the California parks were closed. I think they were closed for over a year out in California. So we were, I think, a much better place to be doing business, certainly since I've been governor.
Great. Let me shift gears here to the topic of education. I want to pull Chris Rufo into the conversation. I know he worked with you on some initiatives. I think, one other thing that the mainstream media has, I think, bashed on is they've kind of started promoting this narrative that you want to ban books from school libraries. You refuse to teach kids about slavery or other unpleasant realities of American history, or pretend that gay people don't exist. Um, since many people, I think, in this room, we're now up to, wow, over 271,000 people. So this is, I think, totally unprecedented in terms of the numbers of people we have participating. By the way, I think Twitter's working much better now. I think it crashed because when you multiply 500,000 people in a room by an account with over 100 million followers, which is Elon's account, I think that creates just a scalability level that was unprecedented. But with my meager followership, it seems to be working much better.
It's we have some scaling issues specifically related to my account. At one point in January, if I tweeted above a certain size, it would crash the servers. And then anyone else who was tweeting at the same time would lose their tweet as well.
So in any
there's some
event,
scaling issues.
Yeah. Well, we're breaking new ground here.
We're scaling issues.
Yes, you're breaking new ground when there are bugs and scaling issues. But in any event, back to the question I was asking you, Governor DeSantis, about education. The media has been, saying you're trying to ban books. You refuse to teach kids about slavery. You want to say that gay people don't exist. What is the truth of the matter for people who maybe have never heard from you before? And then I want to pull Chris Rufo in on this as well.
Yeah, so the whole book ban thing is a hoax. There's not been a single book banned in the state of Florida. You can go buy or use whatever book you want. What we have done is empowered parents with the ability to review the curriculum, to know what books are being used in school, and then to ensure that those books match state standards and are age and developmentally appropriate. So, for example, parents have flagged books in schools that, for example, teach middle school kids how to use sex apps, that provide graphic depictions of sex acts and sex toys for people as young as fifth grade. And so clearly that is not appropriate to be in a middle school classroom. And so parents object, and the schools take them out. I did a press conference that we called Exposing the Book Ban Hoax. And before I had the parents come up, before I spoke, I just played the video that had the images of the books that the parents had objected being in their kids' classroom. And the local news had to cut the feed because they said it was too graphic. Well, if it's too graphic for the 6 o'clock news, how is it okay for a sixth grader or a fifth grader? And so nothing's being banned. They're basically ensuring that we make curation choices that are consistent with state standards. And on the racial history, We eliminated critical race theory from our K through 12 schools. That was the right thing to do. In other words, we're not going to take a kid who comes in at 6 years old and say they're an oppressor or oppressed based on what their race is. That's divisive. That's wrong. We're also not going to be teaching people to hate their country. But what we are going to do is teach the accurate history. So, in the same bill that banned critical race theory, we required teaching thoroughly about racial discrimination that occurred in American history. And Florida's history standards require all of those subjects from slavery, Reconstruction, segregation, all of that to be taught, and will continue to do that. So I think what you see is the left and the media colluding on this. They don't want to actually defend what it is that we are actually legislating or regulating. So they create these hoaxes that somehow you don't want kids to learn that slavery existed in America, which is preposterous. No one actually defends the offending material. And the question is why are there people intent on trying to get this stuff into the classroom? And I think it's part of a political agenda. So our mantra in Florida is this: purpose of the schools is education, not indoctrination. Yes, I think it's very inappropriate to have sexually explicit material in a fifth grade library, 100%. But it's also the case that if you're focusing on that type of instruction, there's an opportunity cost involved. Why shouldn't we be doing more on science or reading or math? And so I think we're getting it right. And I think almost invariably, and Chris Rufo's had to deal with this too, when they're trying to craft these narratives, if you just peel back the onion, you realize that this is something they're manufacturing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I was actually under the impression that there were some books banned, so this is news to me.
And the one this week was that Miami-Dade County took a book that was about like poems from I think like Biden's inauguration, and they moved it from elementary school library to middle school library. The media tried to some of those books. Whereas in Florida, you can buy whatever book you want, but that's a different question than what would be to make those choices about what type of curriculum.
Reasonable people on Earth, and one of the most reasoned people. That I see quite a lot of is that publishers are unwilling to take risks.
Let me shift gears here for a second, because I know we're running out of time. We're supposed to end, I think, around 4, but 4 Pacific. But thank you for giving us a little bit extra time here, Governor. Shifting gears to a major federal issue, immigration. We see I've seen these videos on social media and on TV of what looks like just insanity at the border. What is your take on what's going on there, and how would you address that as president?
Well, I'd reverse what Biden's doing. You need to shut the border down. You should not be entertaining these asylum claims for people crossing illegally. Asylum is a legitimate thing, but these are people that, when they come, I mean, they're being persecuted. These people coming overwhelmingly are economic migrants that are coming across many other different countries. They should be applying for asylum there if they were, truly qualifying for that, but they're not. They know that if they just show up at the southern border, and these are people all over the world that are coming illegally, they know that they will get a sheet of paper saying, okay, come back for a court date in 3 years, and they get released to the interior of our country. It's an absolutely insane system. So we'll stop that. We will move on day one by declaring a national emergency. We will construct a border wall. We will make sure we have remain in Mexico and that we're not entertaining those claims in that way. And we really need to hold the Mexican drug cartels accountable because they're facilitating a lot of this migration. They obviously make money off of it. They treat a lot of these people very horribly as they're trafficking them through Mexico and into the United States. And of course, the cartels have been responsible for moving massive amounts of fentanyl into this country. And that's killing tens of thousands of Americans every year now. And what they're doing is they lace the other types of drugs with the fentanyl. So you may have like a teenage kid doing something they probably shouldn't do, but in prior generations would not have been fatal. And now, if it's laced with fentanyl, these kids can overdose and die. And so mothers are losing kids as a result of this fentanyl epidemic. And I just don't think you could allow these criminal organizations to continue poisoning our population. So it'll be a day one issue. We will bring overwhelming amount of resources to deal with it. And we are going to stop this insanity once and for all.
There's a, I think, follow-up question on immigration from Steve Dace, who is a national radio personality and I think an important commentator in the great state of Iowa. Steve, do you have a comment or question? I think you just need to unmute. If Steve can unmute, then we'll go ahead and ask him for a question. If not, we'll keep rolling here. All right, 3, 2, going, gone.
I'm there,
All right,
guys.
sorry, Steve.
I'm there, guys.
Oh,
Sorry.
there you
There
go.
he is.
All right.
Yeah,
I'm
my bad. First of all, I want to echo what Congressman Massey said to Elon. Elon, if I put down money on January 1st, 2022, that Twitter was going to be the last bastion of free speech on earth, brother, I'd be about as rich as you are on that bet right now. I mean, it's incredible what you have done here, and the restoration of a lot of accounts of people that were truth tellers. When you censor all the scientists who disagree. So I wanted to just say first and foremost on behalf of for it, and crowds cheered and everybody loved it. And
So this is one. There will be follow through. Southwest Florida, Category 4 plus storm. American citizen, if I wasn't running, this would be like
may not have been their intention.
well, look, at the end of the day, this whole business that we're in this chair, but they are not going to have anything to do because I'm have done that in the state of Florida, and I bring that exact attitude up to 1,600 pounds.
Dead in its tracks in K through 12. And just last for fighting back against the left's long march of the institution. So DC is another animal. It's quite different. Culture war strategy
They want to make sure that achievement matters. And I have a good sense of when the legacy media
For example, some of the problems with the university instead of saying you will only get accredited if you there's a reason why we got to that point.
Very much. You were talking about DEI just a minute ago, and I want to ask you both about this growing threat against natural rights and free enterprise. It's this threat of debanking. Now, I know that, Elon, I've read so much about you and what you've gone through. You've called ESG criteria evil incarnate. Governor DeSantis, Florida, saw financially weaponized wokery earlier this year when Wells Fargo Bank dumped both the business and personal accounts of a very prominent 25 years working with Wells Fargo, and they cited new ESG guidelines. Now, similar to the DOJ's previous Operation Choke Point, all these activists for various causes are using this regulatory guidance to debank what they consider to be politically incorrect businesses for the sake of risk management. Now, we say that our rights should not be infringed upon by the government, but what can and should be done about activist-guided financial institutions and these payment processors who are essentially cutting off law-abiding citizens and businesses?
Well, I think it's a fundamental issue that I think not enough conservatives have been wise to. I think more and more are, but at the end of the day, we have certain fundamental rights, and so maybe you're somebody that is, really excited about your Second Amendment rights. And obviously, if the government comes in and infringes that, we know you blow the whistle on that. That's a problem. But what if Wall Street banks are colluding so that somebody can't function in that space, whether it's running a store or anything involving that? Your rights are still being infringed upon in that situation. And so I think this whole ESG movement is really trying to do through the financial sector what they could never achieve through the ballot box. And so they're trying to do an end run around the constitutional system, and they're really trying to change policy. They're trying to change society, and they're trying to change the scope of people's rights. And so in Florida, I just signed anti-ESG legislation, which said things like no ESG criteria in our pension fund. We got a $180 billion state pension fund. No social credit scores for consumers when they're going to bank. In other words, if you apply for a loan, that loan should be judged based on your credit worthiness, not whether you're genuflecting to the appropriate left-wing causes. But one thing we did do is we did provide protection against this debanking with the woke banking. No discrimination based on your religion and other things, which we know is happening. So I think it's a fundamental question, but we will not be a free society if major financial institutions can do through the economy what people could not achieve through the ballot box. Our rights will be restricted will be the end result, and that's not healthy for a free country.
As a follow-up to that, Governor, Dana mentioned Operation Choke Point, and that is a term that's very familiar to crypto companies in Silicon Valley and fintech companies. Basically, it refers to an effort by the federal government, including the SEC, to basically regulate blockchain and crypto companies out of existence. They really feel like they're being driven out of the country. And I'm not talking about scammy ones or the totally fake ones like FTX, but really high quality, good companies, including companies that are public like Coinbase. And these guys are basically begging the government for just a framework. They're just like, tell us how to operate legally and we'll do it. I guess where do you come down on this? What is your view, I guess, broadly of Bitcoin and people's right to hold Bitcoin and to transact Bitcoin?
And Dogecoin.
You have every right to do Bitcoin. The only reason these people in Washington don't like it ban things like Bitcoin under the Constitution. In this space. And I think that the current regime, clearly, they have it out for Bitcoin. And if it continues for another 4 years, they'll probably end up killing it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that is the strong feeling of people in Silicon Valley who are in this space. And I think we'll be heartened to hear your answer on that. I mean, the weird thing is that, and there is a huge constituency of crypto Twitter. So for people who are maybe part of political Twitter who are wondering why we're talking about this, it really has a big audience for this topic.
Dogecoin too, I just want to emphasize. It's a big deal.
Yeah. Bitcoin and Dogecoin.
Yeah.
So shout out to all the Doge fans out there.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is that this administration, they seem to want to ban Bitcoin, but they want to create a CBDC, which stands for a central bank digital currency. What's your take on that?
So we were the first state just last month. We actually got the Florida legislature to pass a law that says Florida does not recognize central bank digital currency, because some states were actually adding that to their uniform commercial code. The federal government's studying this. We did the opposite and say we didn't. Now, the reason why we did that is because what the Federal Reserve has said is, well, we're going to consult with Congress. We'll consult with the executive branch. We don't have a CBDC right now. And ideally, we would get authorization for Congress. Well, wait a minute. It's not ideally. You must get authorization from Congress. I don't think Congress would authorize it. So if they unilaterally try to do this, we're trying to provide protection for people here in Florida. I know Biden did the executive order. They're studying it. I can tell you, if I'm president, we are not doing a central bank digital currency. I think that would be a huge, huge imposition on people's financial freedoms and financial privacy. And oh, by the way, what would the logical result of this be? If the central authority has oversight over this, of course they're going to start imposing ESG criteria. Oh, wait a minute. You filled up your gas tank 3 times this week. You can't do any more. The sky of how they would be able to manipulate this. So I see it as a massive transfer of power from individual consumers to a central authority. And I don't think that's good for a free society. So I'm a no on central bank digital currency.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, Governor, I want to thank you for the time. We could go for hours here, but I know you only had an hour and we've gone over that. So I want to be respectful of your time. I know there's so many people who want to ask questions, and
we should do it again. I mean, I think it was fun. I think this is great. And we'll make sure that that we come back and do it again. This is a great platform. I mean, I would like to see other platforms going in the same direction, but a healthy democratic society needs the robust and thank you.
Thanks, Governor. And yeah, we have over 300,000 people in the room. It's really been pretty incredible. And, you know, we started with some technical
which obviously results in, you know, it's going to be imperfect because it's not scripted. So, but it's genuine. And I think that really gives the people an opportunity to understand who might be their president in a way that's real. So thank you very much for coming on and doing this.
And the invitation's open to any other candidates who might want to do this.
Absolutely. It is important for people to hear directly from candidates. So thank you for working with us on this historic event, and yeah, looking forward to future conversations and just having a great national dialogue.
All righty, everybody. Thank you for just.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.